All right, we're back. We're here for another episode of the Founders Forum, and I'm really excited about our guests today. And just to kind of remind anybody who may be turning in for the first time, we decided as a company that some of our best resources, our best network, are our clients and people kind of in our immediate orbit here at EmberTribe. And so I'm really excited to have both of our guests on today. This is going to be more of an education-focused flair, just in terms of the industry or vertical that we're in. But Shaan, let's kick it off with you. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and Steve, then we'll go over to you.
Yeah, sure. Excited to be here. My name is Shaan Patel, and I am the founder and CEO of Prep Expert. It's an online education company. We've basically focused on test preparation, and we've been around for about 10 years. We've helped over 50,000 students improve their SAT and ACT scores, get into top universities, and win over $100 million in college scholarships. And I think the highlight of our company was when I took it on Shark Tank in 2016 and did an investment deal with billionaire Mark Cuban, and he's been an amazing investor, advocate, and partner for the company ever since.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here with us. Steve, over to you.
Yeah, my name's Steve Mesler. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Classroom Champions, which is an international education nonprofit and charity that operates across the US and Canada, as well as a handful of other countries around the globe. We focus on social emotional learning, so very different than Shaan's business. We focus on kindergarten to eighth grade. So we focus on giving students the building blocks that they're going to need to work, to understand how to work hard, how to have resilience, how to fight through a lot of the trauma that they're experiencing right now, so that when they get ready to work with Shaan's company, they can go off and have even more success. We have had the incredible opportunity during COVID to be able to support schools in a brand new way. We've been able to partner with the NHL. We've been able to partner with huge companies such as Airbnb or our latest partnership that launched last week with NBC. That's going to see Classroom Champions athletes and methodology and lessons of perseverance and grit and resilience reach over 4 million kids already. It's reached over 4 million kids in the last week and a half. We project that's going to reach about 20 million kids in the coming few months. So we're excited, and it's an interesting time in the ed tech sphere, to say the least, with the transition that's happening across the industry.
For sure. It's funny, as people are watching or listening, it's easy to glaze over some of these numbers, but both of your companies combined at scale are reaching just millions and millions of people, which is amazing, right? It's just that you can have that point of leverage kind of in this new age to have the impact that you're having. One question I'd love to ask is just, because a common myth that will bust as we're speaking to founders is that maybe people think that they have to have a lifelong career in a certain space in order to then start a business, on their own. Tell us, maybe Steve, we'll start with you. Tell us what you did in a past life and maybe how this set you up for what you're doing now.
I am a wonderful transition point into that comment there, Josh. My job before Classroom Champions, in essence, was running for 5 seconds and sitting for a minute, wearing tights with 3 other dudes in a sled with me. I was a bobsledder, in case that didn't put it all together for everybody. So, for me, it really, the background that I was able to take from sport and move into entrepreneurship is, not too different from whether it's an athlete or whether it's military, people who have different experiences, different leadership experiences, different leaderships of triumph and failure. And I experienced all of those through attending 3 Olympic Games for the US and winning an Olympic gold medal in 4-man bobsled. So small team, just like that startup mentality environment. That put me in a situation where, much like most founders, you don't really know what you're doing until you start to go. I had a coach, I used to call him Yoda, but a guy named Yannis Kraskins, who was a Latvian bobsled coach. And Yannis was a driving coach. He was Soviet era driving coach. And, for a time I was a push athlete, which means I was one of the horses, much bigger and broader, 2 feet taller, 1 foot wider, when I was an athlete. But Yannis, when I was trying my hand at driving, I remember walking a track with Yannis. It was the first time I was going to go down the bobsled track. And bobsled tracks are all different. They range between 1,200 meters and 1,600 meters long. They range between going 70 miles an hour at the top speed to 95 miles an hour. They all have different turns and different things. It's not like a running track where it's the same everywhere across the world. And we're walking up the track, and Yannis is giving me some ideas, but I wanted more information. in more detail from him. What do I do here, Giannis? Like, where do I turn? Where do I go? And he kind of just smirks at me. He was like, I'll tell you more after you go once, which is a pretty scary idea when you're about to go off the top of a mile of ice and you're gonna hit, we were in Austria at the time, you're gonna hit over 80 miles an hour. Whether you are going down fast or slow, you're gonna hit 80 miles an hour. And that's kind of what entrepreneurship is. You can go to school, you can learn, you can have mentors, but really, it's really hard for somebody to mentor you until you have a little bit of a dabbling in the experience of what that is, what it's like to hold that kind of stress for that long, what it's like to have those late nights and those early mornings and the uncertainty. And that's where my background really came in handy when it came to entrepreneurship in a way that I, wouldn't have known, except for, Yoda probably could have told me at the beginning of the experience that was what was coming. But yeah, that was my heading into, I had an education degree. I had been a teacher earlier in my, before pre-sport, post-college career. And my co-founder is my sister, who has her PhD in education and social policy. And, one of the early, huge supports turned out to be my wife, who has her PhD in psychology and business management. So, I was able to pull, early free resources into the table with me too.
Fantastic. Well, I'll spare everybody the cool runnings jokes, maybe until later in the conversation.
Maybe later. I'll bring those in with some Top Gun and F-16 jokes later too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Shaan, let's go over to you. Just tell us a little bit more about kind of your origin story, your background, and maybe how it set you up for Prep Expert.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I, similar to Steve, didn't have a solid understanding of entrepreneurship or what I was doing in the beginning. My company was really birthed out of my own experience. First SAT I ever took, barely scored above average. Then I improved my SAT score about 640 points by self-studying for the exam to a perfect score. Completely changed my life, got into top universities, won $500,000 in scholarships, got to meet the president of the United States. So it was just like this life-changing thing, this one test for me. And so when I got to college, I wanted to help other students improve their test scores. And so I thought the best way to do that would be to write an SAT prep book. I thought it would be, this like best-selling book and everyone would love it. The first SAT prep book by a perfect score student, it sounded good. But then reality hit, which is when I pitched my book proposal to over 100 literary agents and publishers, and every single one rejected me. They said, the SAT prep market is too competitive. You don't have credentials. I saw every single reason why it wouldn't work. And so that's when I kind of took my destiny into my own hands, I continued to write the book and decided I was just going to use the book as the curriculum for a course. So I taught my very first course, and we had an average SAT score improvement of 376 points over 6 weeks, which is equivalent to taking a student from the 50th percentile to the 90th percentile. And so, after we saw those results, we had parents knocking down the door for more courses. I began training other instructors, and, the rest is history. But it went through a lot of rejection, a lot of learning, a lot of getting your hands dirty and learning as you go. As Steve said, I have an education with, I have an MBA, but you can't really teach entrepreneurship. And I didn't learn much about entrepreneurship with my MBA. I had to learn it from hands-on learning. And so, I think it's really important that people just go out there and try it and not wait for the perfect moment when they approach entrepreneurship. And you'll get rejections, as all entrepreneurs do, and you'll feel failure. But I think the mark of a good entrepreneur is their ability to be resilient to that. And if you have resilience and perseverance and hard work, good things can happen for you.
So
go ahead, Steve.
I mean, Shaan, a couple of things that you said, Shaan, really spoke to me there. And I mean, one of them is, one of my, other than you guys, one of my other favorite entrepreneurship podcasts is called Masters of Scale with Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn. And like one of the first podcasts I listened to, I can't remember whether it was Reed or one of his guests that talked about it. And it was in essence, like, if you don't look back at your first product with a bit of shame, you waited too long. So I hear you, Shaan, on that one. And, if you're waiting,
I definitely look back at my first course with a bit of shame, like the curriculum we were using, the books I was giving, etc. But it worked,
I look back at, my sister and I look back at some of the materials we gave to teachers to support them with the mentorship relationships that we create. And I mean, we had noticed, kind of an opportunity to make a difference when I was still competing. And it was for us, I used to go in and, give a talk at a school like athletes do or other successful people do. And I was an Olympic bobsledder. Like, who was I to these kids? And they would be excited because they were told they should be excited because I was an Olympian who was there. But again, they didn't know me, and I gave a talk, and hopefully it was good and relevant, but wasn't hyper relevant. It wasn't targeted to their needs or to their teachers' needs. And I would leave, and I'd never see those kids again. I'd say, well, if one or two kids listened, it's worth my time. And as an athlete, you don't go to the track and do something to just hope it worked. Like, you're doing these things in a plan and a process. And that was what we wanted to show kids. Was we saw an opportunity in education there's you have some of the best mathematicians, are, embedded in the textbooks. You have some of the best historians are embedded in their ideas, are embedded in the way they interpret it, embedded in history. Same thing in science and English and arts and the Shakespeare's and all these things. Where are the Shakespeare's of the thing that we hire for as business owners, which is grit and resilience, and teamwork and empathy? And like, yes, we all look for certain skills, but ultimately we're going to hire the people that they need a certain base level of skills, but 80-90% of the jobs we're hiring for, they need these other skills. And the school system just don't have resources for those things. So that's where we decided that, in my career was a great thing. I had more to offer than just teaching kids how to push a bobsled, which is, by the way, like one of the most worthless skills you could learn in life. It transfers into nothing. But the way that I got there and the way that I got to the podium and the things I used are the things that we wanted to teach. 10 years ago, there was one state that had legislation or standards around social emotional learning, SEL as the term in education is called now. Today, all 50 states have legislation or standards around these things, which means 10 years ago, there was no place in the school day. Teachers had to sneak this stuff in. It was implicit, right? Like, it was implicit that you as a teacher would help kids be better people, but no one ever taught you how to do it. There was no room in your curriculum or your time to actually do it. So schools have now realized that, and the pandemic's really launched that, is there's explicit needs. So Shaan, as you say that, like, both of us, it sounds like, we believed in our strength as our experience was our strength. Not necessarily our formal education. And then I'm sure you, just like me, have gone out and gotten experts and made them part of the team, and certainly built them, leverage them as a foundational building blocks. But, when you have a thing that can work, there's something that'll push you. I think as an entrepreneur, that's the thing that everybody out there needs to really understand, is you got to believe in yourself and your product to make things work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the team helps tremendously. Like, I don't want to sit here and say that I did it all by myself. I have an amazing team. Just, you have to find the right people. And that's half the battle too, is finding the right people who believe in the mission and who have those skills that you just talked about to help you build, your company and make and scale it, to be honest. Yeah.
I'd love to put a finer point on grit and resilience. And so I think both you will have kind of different perspectives on this, or different angles that you approach it, but two-part question, I guess. Shaan, maybe starting with you, 100 pitches to literary agents or to publishers. I'm not sure which one it was, but like, how do you cultivate grit in your life? But then second part of the question is, when do you give up or pivot or change? Like, is it at 101 pitches, or was that the magic number? Like, I'd love to hear both of you guys weigh in on that. Like, A, how do you cultivate, but B, when do you kind of read the room and say, okay, maybe I got to try something different?
Yeah, I think to answer your first question, how do you cultivate grit? I think a lot of it comes from how much self-control you've developed over time. I think especially in today's world, and I'm sure Steve sees this with kids, where people are so used to instant gratification, people have lost the patience and their self-control to wait. And a lot of this is patience, especially with entrepreneurship. I mean, everyone wants to have the $1 million, $1 billion startup, and they want it tomorrow. And that's just not how the real world works. And so I think, for me, I've learned over time through school and through studying, the SAT actually, spending those hundreds of hours studying for the SAT taught me a lot about self-control. Becoming a physician, which I've also done, it's taught me a lot about self-control and patience and hard work. And so that's really how I've cultivated grit is actually through formal education. Now, that's definitely not the only way. As Steve has mentioned, he's done it as an athlete. You can do it in all kinds of life experiences. And then in terms of the second question, when do you pivot? I think pivoting isn't really something that is a one-time thing that you just do and it's, you're going to pivot this way. There's millions of little pivots that happen in my business probably every day, every year. And so, you're constantly pivoting, trying new ideas. I think I really love the lean startup method, which is trying little things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. And I think that's what's helped, particularly my startup become successful, is because we're constantly being able to pivot and try new ideas. And I think the same is true for entrepreneurship. You don't have to necessarily make radical paradigm shifts all the time. Little tweaks, little pivots can really make a huge difference. And it's how much you're trying and experimenting and treating it almost like a science project to see what works and what doesn't. Yeah.
Brilliant. Steve, I know gold medal wasn't just every time you stepped up to the sled. So how'd you cultivate grit? And just tell us a little bit more about kind of your path to pivoting or to trying something that didn't work. And
yeah, no, I mean, I thought, Shaan, your comments there are spot on. I mean, it's so interesting to be in a room with people who have experienced that in just in totally different ways than I have myself, and all of those ways are the right way, like that. And that's the in the education system, that is the confusing thing about social emotional skills or social emotional development for kids, which is all those other subjects I mentioned. There are right and wrong answers.
Yeah.
Generally, alternative facts aside, there are generally right and wrong answers. There is no right and wrong answer of how to cultivate, grit or resilience in kids or in adults. So it's become a thorn in the education system side of how you measure these things. Because if you're investing billions of dollars, you want to figure out how your money is going to work. Just like Shaan, just like your clients, really, really objective, I'm sure. Your score went up or your score went down. How much? From a cultivating grit as an adult in an entrepreneur role, I think I'll say that I was an adult when I was an athlete, but it felt like a different kind of life at that point. I think you've got to be able to find the joy in the effort. And it sounds cheesy and it sounds cliche, but I think that is almost every successful entrepreneur I know loves the effort. I was the kid who, when I got in trouble when I was young, I didn't bother me at all because I got to go to my room. I got my 2 baskets of Legos out. I spilled them out. I built an entire city. When the city was finished, I tore it down. I started over again until I was let out of my room. And I think that was, as I look back, that's what entrepreneurship is. Like, that is the people who you see continuously flipping companies or building companies, is they're building their Lego sets, and the joy is the build. Once the thing's built, they go, okay, and they hand it off to somebody else. And then they move on. And once you've done that 2 or 3 times, you're not doing it because you need the next sets of millions of dollars for them. They're doing it because they enjoy the process, and they enjoy that. And I think one thing I've really, over the pandemic myself, is come to realize that, like, I not only enjoy the process, I love that I love the process. Like, I just love that about myself. And I think finding that has brought me personally a lot of joy. So I think challenging and finding the joy in the process, which I just can't say enough. It may be cliche, but I don't think you can say it enough. When it comes to trying something different. I'll go back to my sport days, which is how I got into bobsled. I was a track athlete at University of Florida, like not quite Cool Runnings, but pretty damn close. And, I was sitting on my couch. It was going in my senior year going into my fifth year, because I couldn't do my internship in the spring because of track season. And I was sitting on my couch 2 days out of Tommy John surgery, which is elbow surgery that pitchers have, but you get it from throwing javelin too as a decathlete. And I look back at my athletic career, and I was national champion in high school and then tore my hamstring my senior year. Luckily, I'd already signed my letter of intent. Freshman year, started doing great, hurt myself. Sophomore year, junior year, senior year, all 4 years of college, I was hurt and didn't finish my seasons. Never really had that moment. And I had this moment sitting on the couch 2 days out of surgery, like, okay, like clearly this track thing I'm not going to go to the Olympics doing this. I should move on. As an athlete, anybody who did sports in high school or college has had that moment. When's the day that I'm going to now be done? And it's hard and it sucks. I was a little bit too stupid to completely be done. So I thought, well, what's going on? In the back of my head was a coach who had a guy who went to bobsled. So I emailed the Olympic Committee back in 2000, which was on Yahoo with one arm. And they got back to me and said, yeah, you're the right size. Because I wrote him a Dear John letter, basically, that said, I'm this big, this strong, this fast. Can I do this? And the next day I got an email back and I started training from there. But for me, it wasn't just about trying to go find something else. It was, okay, I spent 4 years at a flagship Division I factory for sports, and I still couldn't succeed. I have to change the way I do things. And it came down to, I was doing everything right that I thought I was supposed to be doing. But if you're doing everything that you think is right, that you've been told is right, and it's not working for you, it's not the right thing for you. So, for us, whenever you have a little injury, if you guys got a nice car, if you got a little dink in your car, you don't keep driving that puppy on the highway, you take it to the garage. So the little dink doesn't turn into a big dink. Same thing with a hamstring as an athlete or whatever. I was in the training room my entire career, all the time, to the point where I got banned from the training room, what turned out to be 2 weeks before I tore my ulnar collateral ligament in my elbow. And I had to go back into the training room because I now had a tear that was going to require cortisone in surgery. So sitting on that couch that day, the same day I decided I would email Olympic Committee, I also had to make a decision that I just wasn't going to get hurt anymore. And I wasn't going to recognize my injuries, and I was going to push through them. And 6 weeks later, I was out on the track in Gainesville, and I was sprinting, and I could feel my hamstring twinge, but it was after my student teaching that day and after personal training, some more clients that afternoon. And then on the track in the evening, and A, the training room was closed. B, no one was there to work for me anymore. So I just went back to the line, ran again, back to the line, ran again. And I wound up with a career that was 9 years of pushing bobsleds that I didn't get hurt, didn't miss one World Cup, didn't miss one World Championships. And that all came because I just made a decision to make a change. So I think that it comes back to your question, which is, when do you hit that point? I think you hit that point when you realize that you have exhausted your options doing it the way you thought you should do it. And there are always other ways to find your skill sets, whether it's from track to bobsled, whether it's from bobsled to entrepreneurship. You've got strengths. You got to find those strengths and go after them.
It's incredibly insightful to hear both of you answer that question, because I think in both cases, you had a vision that was very clear, whether it be to make it to the Olympics or to have the best test prep product there is. And your initial paths to going there just were very different, right? It was write a book, or it was, I'm going to be a track athlete. And then you were very flexible and open to seeing alternate paths to get to the ultimate vision, but then the vision never really changed. Mm-hmm. And so I think one thing you both hit on is this concept of just iterating and this whole process and discipline of iteration. So we know that being close to your customers and learning from them is one of the best ways to do that. So I'd love to hear from both of you. What are some of the ways that you get feedback from either your prospects or your past clients, whether those be the actual end users, in your case, Steve, of students or schools that you serve, or Shaan, the parents of the students or the students themselves, but just what are some of the ways that you're learning from your customers, and how do you synthesize that feedback to continue that process of iteration?
Yeah, happy to jump in here. We've always, that's kind of been the bread and butter for us, coming as athletes. I moved to a foreign country to work with a coach who told me what I did wrong 50 times a day, and then listen to him and then make those adjustments. So it's in our DNA, it's in my DNA to listen to critical feedback. And our mantra here, and what we tell our teachers in particular, who are the ones we get our most robust feedback from, which is, if you don't tell us what you were doing wrong, you don't care. and which just, we want to open the first thing you want to do is make it okay for somebody to give you critical feedback. And in a world where people are, where the sensitivity levels are different, people are living in a very scarce environment right now. I mean, everybody's living in scarcity through COVID. So everybody's defenses are higher than they've ever been. So, first and foremost is we create a culture at Classroom Champions that makes it okay to give each other feedback. But then we opened up the floodgates for our teachers. They've, ultimately they helped us craft our curriculum from day one. The lessons we're teaching, what we're seeing, what we should be looking for. All of that came teacher fed. Today, now it's more focused on our technology platform. And the system that we have, we went with a Netflix style. We basically cloned Netflix and Disney Plus style of, way to serve up the content in the curriculum, because we heard from teachers that all of their systems were folder hierarchies and really hard to navigate. So we wanted to be responsive to them in that way. So for us, it's, also it's listening, but it's also then creating empowerment of your users. We have teacher ambassadors. We have, opportunities for students. We have opportunities for our athletes to tell us what they think we should be teaching. All of our topics and units, goal setting, leadership, feedback, all have to be grounded in whether it's an Olympian, Paralympian, NCAA student athlete, NFL player, NHL player. It has to be things that are authentically easy for them to talk about. And then we give them bumpers and ideas of how to fold that in. So for us, it is, again, culture at your company that allows for feedback, then a culture amongst your users that rewards and allows rewards feedback. And reward doesn't necessarily have to be giving them something like a Amazon gift card. Reward can be, they told you something and then it reflects in the product. That's how we've built our biggest champions, is that our teachers who have been with us for years see themselves in the products. And when you can see yourself in the product, it's just as, as Shaan and I are passionate about our own companies, we clearly see ourselves in our products. The more you can let people see themselves in the products, the more, ambassadorship and goodwill you're going to build.
Really good.
Yeah, I think that's really well said by Steve. I mean, creating that culture where it's okay to, give and get feedback is really, really important. We do that through both formal ways, such as, surveys, whether it's with our students, parents, employees, but also I'd say one of the other ways that we get feedback and use it to iterate is simply looking at the data. So a lot of it will be looking at data in Google Analytics, or looking at screen captures of how people are navigating our platform and website. Using that data to make good decisions for iterations to our platform has been really helpful in creating a better user experience.
It's really good. It seems like in both cases, it's just blending together the quantitative and the qualitative, like making sure that you don't neglect one, for the other, and that you're combining a full picture of both, and then coming up with an action plan to execute on it. That's great. I mean, there's no shortage of tools, right, to collect all this. It's usually the problem isn't collecting the data as much as it is sorting through it and taking action, prioritizing things like that.
And figuring out what's most important, right? Like, you're going to get so much feed. If you create a culture, if you do a good job of creating the culture internally and externally, you're going to get a lot of people saying things. If you ask somebody what they think and you allow them the ability to freely think it and say it, you're going to get a lot. So it is, I think, Shaan's point about what the data is telling you, and then, combining that is just be prepared for the floodgates to open if you're doing it well.
So in most cases, founders with companies of your size and kind of your age, you've hit an inflection point at some point. So I'd love for you to think about maybe it doesn't have to be the greatest point of scale necessarily, but that inflection point, that place where you either got crazy product market fit or some point of validation. Can you think back to a time where you had that first surge in whatever KPI it might be, but for you, what was it and what led up to it?
I think, my biggest inflection point at the company was when we made the decision to be completely digital. So as I mentioned, 10 years ago when I taught my first course, it was an in-person classroom. And so that was kind of the model we had for many years. And then we eventually started adding online courses. And just actually with COVID, we decided to to close all of our classrooms, and we had quite a few around the country. And that was because of COVID, but I think it's been a good thing for us. It's helped us scale. Now we do have to, fight some of those challenges that everyone knows about with online learning compared to in-person classrooms. And I think our instructors do a good job along with our team on how to continue to iterate and keep students engaged. But, I think that was a big, big inflection point for us because it changed us from kind of a physical in-person company to a completely ed tech company that's just online. And you didn't really invest in our digital infrastructure and platform. And that's been a pretty big inflection point for us. Yeah.
Classroom Champions, I think it's been about the same amount of time, about 10 years that we've been going for. I'd say there's probably 3 different inflection points. I think number one was when our current chair is a guy named Dave Potrick, who Dave was the CEO of Charles Schwab, mid 90s, the mid 2000s. So when you think about consumer investing going online, Schwab was the tip of the spear and Dave was in charge of the ship when that happened. So when you have somebody like that who, both, has incredible experience, he teaches leadership at Wharton and also financial resources as a nonprofit where, we are not able to go out and get, seed rounds of funding. So we don't have the ability to go, to burn debt for 3 years until we become profitable. Like you basically, in essence, have to be profitable right away, or you have to find a few years where you can be, uber profitable, tuck that cash reserve away for a rainy day. So I think when we got the right chair on board and gave me a mentor, again, coming from sliding down mountains wearing tights, it was really, really helpful to get the right mentor. And then that caused me to, find new mentors as well and build our board. And having him come on as somebody who's, stated, so look, I don't want to just write a check. I want to get involved. When you bring that kind of talent on board, whether it's on your staff or whether it's on your board, it allows you to open the door to all kinds of other people. So that was a huge inflection point. I think the second one was when we really started to embrace and understand partnerships and how we could leverage our status as a nonprofit, our USP, our unique selling point of athletes who are volunteering, who are just looking to make a difference. And then how we can then leverage that versus the, NBC and Class Dojo for-profit entities who have NBC, who has incredible production, and it's NBC, and, they have Olympic footage, to Class Dojo that has this amazing reach. And Sam Chaudhry, the founder and CEO over there, is a good friend. And when we came up with this idea, I think those are the ideas, the inflection points when all of a sudden we realized how much we could amplify our reach and fulfill our mission of helping kids get the skills and the tools that they need to excel. And then the third one would be when we realized that our product was almost too hands-on as a mentorship and a virtual. We've been virtual from the beginning because you couldn't travel. We don't have the old gray-haired has-beens like me as mentors. We have currently competing athletes who are in the moment of their careers, who can show kids that it's not just 2.5 weeks of glory on television or the day of the Super Bowl. There's a process. And I'm not just going to tell you about my process. In fact, I'm going to bring you along on the bus with me on the way to the show for an entire year or multiple years at a time over the mentorship program. That involves lifts for the teachers. What we wanted to do was create a little bit more easily accessible, a little bit more digital box program. And so we came up with a broader curriculum that is now really helping us. Last year 2 years ago, we were serving 9,000 kids in our programs. Today, we're serving 85,000 just in our programs, let alone a reach of over 4 million this year through partnerships. So I think those are the three points of which our inflection points really helped us serve our mission the best.
Fantastic. Something that you both alluded to is obviously that, you're only as good as your team. Like you can't do this alone, whether that be through mentors or through direct hires. So a lot of folks who are watching or listening to this are maybe making those first hires, or they've maybe made those first hires and they're either really thrilled or really scared about that decision. What are some things that you can share just about very consciously building your team? So maybe those first key 3 to 5 hires. What's your thought process there? What type of person do you look for? And if it, bears in the conversation, what are maybe some of the tactics that you do to source candidates or to find great people?
Yeah. So I think that's always it's an interesting time in any company when it scales beyond yourself or the founders. I'd say, a few tips I have is, first, your first couple hires, always try to make them the things that are taking up your time that are low value. There's a lot of things I used to do. I used to pick up the phone. I used to do all the customer service emails. And so it wasn't, my first hire was like no brainer, an administrative assistant, right? To help get some of that stuff done. I think you don't necessarily, especially if you're strapped for cash, as most startups are, you don't necessarily need to hire a full-time person or a part-time person even. A lot of this can be done through freelancers and using platforms like Upwork.com. And then the third tip I'd have is in terms of finding good people, especially when you're making full-time hires, is to, obviously the interview process is very important, but I would typically, I usually, like when I'm trying to hire a web developer, I'll usually give them a small project or task as a sample. And that usually gives a very good idea to me as well as my team as to whether this person will be able to perform at the level that we expect. And that works for all kinds of positions, but even if it's a content position, ask them to write a blog article or something like that. And that's usually good because someone can interview really well, but if their work performance isn't there, it doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of been a good formula for me over the years.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat the things that Shaan said. I think those are project-based work. I think that's a lesson that I learned halfway through, where people who there are a lot of people who are really great salespeople out there, and they are fantastic at selling themselves. So you've really got to put up some gates that you can test that skill set. That got burnt plenty of times on that. I think without repeating anything that Shaan said, because I agree with everything that he said. And I thought, Shaan, you laid it out really great. Like 1, 2, 3, here you go. And if I didn't need to, feel the need to talk so much, I would, probably end it there. But, I would say that one thing that I think we're getting better at Classroom Champions is being open and honest about what it means to work here from a cultural standpoint, from a feedback standpoint, from a better and better standpoint, where if you can't handle being asked to take courses and upskill constantly. And if you don't feel comfortable handling that, then this is a place that you need to think twice about, because we're going to, just because we want to upskill, Shaan's ability to do X doesn't mean we don't think Shaan's ability to do X isn't fantastic. We just think that you can use the bobsled analogy. We're always looking for hundreds. We're always looking for hundreds. And, there's times where as a CEO and a founder, especially, you can add too much value by, trying to give too much feedback or trying to give too much upskilling that'll wear your folks down. So that is I think a founderific issue that we have to deal with, which is, you have to be strategic about where you find those hundreds for your people so you don't wear them out. But I do think that being open and honest about that so that it's not a surprise, and those, we've erred in that way as well. And I think the last thing for us has been understanding that sometimes the people that you hire are perfect for now, but they're not perfect, or they were perfect when you hired them, but they're not perfect for now. Mm-hmm. And that's probably been the hardest thing for me to come to terms with, where I have a coaching mentality. I have a better and better mentality. I founded an organization that is about, better equipping people, kids in this case, but also teachers, to get better, which means that I have a very hard time letting go that I can't help you get better. And I've, the old adage of, hire slowly, fire quickly is really hard it's really hard as an entrepreneur. It's really hard of anybody. I wouldn't just throw that at entrepreneurs. I think no one likes, unless you're Ari Gold, in Entourage, no one likes to fire anybody. But understanding when those times come, I think, is a really important inflection point for you as a leader, especially as you're building your business, that like sometimes the people who are on the bus today will not be on the bus with you tomorrow.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think there's a lot of maybe people who are timid about having those conversations. They feel like it's rude, but it's really, you're doing everybody a favor when you're honest with expectations around culture fit, because the other person has to work with you or for you, or on the same team as you.
The first person you're getting to. Yeah, I mean, the first person that I had to let go is a guy who's an Olympian, a guy who was our first hire. And, I consider him a friend. And it was the single hardest thing I had to do in my professional career to date was get on a plane and fly to see him, because we're mainly a virtual organization and do that. So it gets easier. It does. I think I always want it to be hard. I never want it to be easy. I don't think that's a healthy way that's not the way I want to live. I think you also have to make some choices as an entrepreneur, since you do have the flexibility of it being your company. You need to make some choices of how you want to live your life and how you want to, live your career. And, those are some of the choices you get the opportunity to make.
It's really good. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, I think something that both of you have said is you value continuous improvement and you're a lifelong learner. So outside of maybe the feedback that you're getting from your business, running it in the day-to-day, how are you upskilling? How are you learning? Like what sources are you tapping into? Because again, there's a lot of advice. There's no shortage of advice to listen to. It could be podcasts, it could be books, it could be other mentors or people, but how do you guys continue to feed yourselves and get to that next level?
I'd say, I think there's probably three places that I really like to learn and get feedback from. So the first is books. A couple of great books that I think are really good for entrepreneurs. I mentioned Lean Startup already, obviously a classic. Another lesser known one, but still very popular, is Rework by Jason Friedman, I think, or Jason Fried. That's very good. Then second is podcasts. And I think podcasts and audiobooks are great, because even if you're as busy as an entrepreneur, as most entrepreneurs are, you can, do it on your commute, do it at the gym, whatever. You're able to get that content in. And then the third one is I actually love just attending some webinars with really great digital marketers or entrepreneurs, because they usually pack in some great content. I see millions of ways that new ideas that come to life and applications I could apply to my business by just learning from experts through their webinars. And so I'd say those are the three biggest ways that I continue to learn, on a weekly basis to get ideas from other places and then figure out how to apply them to my business.
Fantastic. I on my end, very similar: books, leaders, books, podcasts, and mentors. I'm very fortunate to have, a handful of people both. I also my volunteer gig is I sit on the board of directors for the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, where I have the incredible opportunity to sit at a table with amazing people, whether, they are Larry Probst, who built, EA. So, many of our childhoods, if you played FIFA or if you played Madden or if you played any of those NHL, Larry was the guy who, built EA from 91 through, and is executive chairman now, to be in rooms like that. So I think, being very conscious of the people I'm around and watching them from a mentorship standpoint, and being able to have people I can call, from and sticking in the leadership realm. Yeah. I mean, some books for folks out there. A guy named John Berardi wrote a book called Changemaker. John, JB, as he's known, JB built Precision Nutrition, which is a nutrition company that sold the majority of it a couple of years ago. But Changemaker, it's labeled as a fitness book, personal trainer fitness book. Don't believe the cover. It is probably the single greatest marketing and leadership book that I've ever read. Another book is What Got You Here Won't Get You There, by executive coach Marshall Goldsmith. Amazing. As a type A personality, really, really helpful. It's probably something that along with How to Win Friends and Influence People are probably two books that I listen to on a quarterly basis just to help ground myself. We do annual 360s for all the team to do that. So for both myself as well as the whole team, and a company-wide survey on an annual basis to see if and we're seeing those differences now accumulating over time. From a podcast standpoint, a couple of podcasts to throw at you guys. I mentioned the one, Masters of Scale, but the other one I've really gotten into lately is Dr. Anthony Huberman, who's a prof at Stanford. He is doing some work in the neuroscience world that we can all connect to just get ourselves better. So Huberman Lab podcast is what it's called. And I mean, from sleep to nutrition to all these other things, he's digging in really deep. So, I like to go outside of my world as well, not just stick in entrepreneurship or leadership. I would, encourage everybody out there to find some people who are doing things outside of your field. And you may start and think maybe it's not the best use of your time. I really encourage you that it's been for me. And I, like Shaan, like I do it on the commute, or I do it during my workouts, and listen that way. So.
Fantastic advice. Yeah, get outside the echo chamber and be exposed to different ideas, different fields.
We can create our own Facebook, echo chamber ourselves if we, just only have this list of podcasts we listen to, and we only, listen to these people to hear what books they're going to tell us to read, and that we all fall into that, and it's great, and we learn a ton, and we dive deep. But man, there's such a rich amount of content out there. There's also plenty of crap out there too, but there's such a rich amount of content to find. Seek it out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, final thoughts. If you could go back to year one of being in the trenches of running your business or your organization, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to yourself that you feel may also apply to other people who are early stage with their company? Just could be as general as you'd like it to be, but if you had that kind of 10 to 15 seconds to speak to your younger self, what would you say? And go ahead, whoever has it first, whoever's been struck.
I mean, I'm going to echo something that Steve said earlier, because I thought it was really good, which is just enjoy the process. I mean, it can be stressful and really hard at times, but it is just so sweet as you work through the process to get better. And you can kind of see it in your company growing, and the lives you change, and the revenue you bring in, et cetera. Like it's an amazing process to be able to grow something from an idea. And I think that's what's really special about entrepreneurship. That you're able to take something in your mind and bring it to, material fruition. And that's what's really special. I think if I had the option just to be handed a successful educational company without having to go through the 10-year process, I would say no, because I really enjoyed the process, and that's what makes it special. So I would say that to any entrepreneur, is that the struggles are what build the character and make the entire journey of entrepreneurship worth it.
Well said.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I would say to myself 10 years ago, understand what helped you in sport isn't necessarily going to be all of the things that are going to help you now. And don't get lost in your work and yourself like you did in sport. Sport has a finite goal, a finite end, which means that your mental health can hold on and point to that end point. Entrepreneurship doesn't work that way. I would tell myself, you're going to drive yourself, if you keep doing it the way you're doing it, which is what I did, you're going to drive yourself into a hole. And in 2019, I hit a really deep clinical depression, and I had to go to counseling and had to, take medication. And I'd never experienced that before. And it, ultimately, I would say, just don't try to solve every problem. Not every problem has a solution. If you try to solve every problem, you're going to fail. And just don't lose yourself in it by doing that. And you do that in sport. Like you do that in sport, and you're not vulnerable in sport. I was on a team where there was 30 guys who wanted my job for 10 years. So you don't show vulnerability, and holding that together and keeping it together. Maybe as you're in your 20s, you can do it. But it's not a lifelong, it's an anti-skill. It's not a lifelong anti-skill that you should maintain.
So well said. Thank you both. I think, one thing that I appreciate about the time that we spent together is not only are you both talented founders, you've built great organizations, but you both are wise. You have a lot of wisdom that I think it's not just about winning in your business. It's also about living a fulfilled life. It's also about being a great son or husband or whatever it might be. And so thank you for bringing that to the table and kind of rounding out our conversation. I think it can be easy to get into these hyper tactical, like, all right, just give me the playbook. Let me execute and win. But it's like, you can lose everything if you just be hyper focused on that. So thank you for sharing a little bit about your lives, but also your journey. And we barely scratched the surface. So I hope we can do it again sometime soon. Thank you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.